1 in 3 bites of food that humans consume is directly directly pollinated by a pollinator. And then the other 2/3 of the food that we eat is indirectly pollinated. So our food's food. So the things that we raise to become our food are also indirectly or directly supported by pollinators.
Everyone in the suburbs likes to eat. And without pollinators, you've got wind-pollinated crops. Things like rice, oats, things like that. So we'd have a very bland diet without bees. And while that may not be a direct suburban issue, it's a human issue, right? You know, bees pollinate everything from carrots and broccoli and garlic to, you know, strawberries, almonds, macadamia nuts. I mean, it goes on and on, right?
It's the backbone of our food system, and like once they're gone, we can't eat as well as we once did, and everyone's life after that would not be the same as what we are having right now. It's many species that have already disappeared. Our food systems, we depend on it because that's, you know, how we eat. That's so dependent on them.
As a landscape professional, somebody that maintains landscapings and creates new landscapings in residential and park and university settings, it's really important for us to reduce our reliance on chemically synthetic herbicides that we know affect pollinator species. It's really important for us to recognize that a monoculture of lawn is not necessarily the best thing for our environment, and that we need to change perceptions of the people that are around us. And we can only do that through educating people to the importance of these insects and the life that they bring and the part of the cycle that they provide to us. And the most important thing that you can do is be a steward to the land and always keep in mind that you're working on something to leave it as a legacy for others in the future, and do your best to be a good steward of the environment.
I started beekeeping about 6 years ago. I took one of Sarah Redlaird's class through the Bee Girl organization, and then started attending SOBA meetings, which is the Southern Oregon Beekeepers Association, and I started chasing swarms. My first season beekeeping, I caught about 86 swarms with a couple of other women who were on the swarm list at the time, and it was kind of love at first sight, you know, or first swarm maybe. I worked commercially for a couple of years for Old Soul Apiaries as their field manager, and that was going down into pollination, queen grafting, queen rearing, maintenance colony, creation and management, and things like that. So I ended up with quite a bit of commercial experience through that company.
Christina Lefevre is one of the leads at Pollinator Project Rogue Valley, and she came to Jarrett and I's GIS class last spring and worked with our teacher to create a project called the Rogue Valley Buzzway, where we as students were mapping pollinator habitat here in the Rogue Valley based on data she had received from surveys from people here in the valley. And after the class was over, Jarrett and I were our whole class was asked if anyone was interested in doing it as a capstone project. So Jarrett and I both volunteered to do that. So in the fall we started our capstone project, where we're mapping pollinator habitat based off of a survey that we helped Christina create. It highlights where there's public and private pollinator habitat, mainly pollinator gardens and bee certified USA areas like SOUs involved or is incorporated into the map, as well as other public parks here in the area. Also highlights potential areas, meaning that it meets one of the 4 criteria to become a pollinator habitat, which is forage, water, habitat, and no use of pesticides or herbicides. So potential just means that it has one of those 4 criteria, but not necessarily all 4 of them.
we're trying to get people to like change up their yards to have more suitable habitat for insects and just pollinators in general. We hope that when neighbors would see like their neighbors change up their yard, it would inspire them to do the same for themselves, and would kind of create a domino effect throughout the valley. And in the urban cores, it's really hard for insects to kind of survive because a lot of native bee species can't go more than 1,000 meters from their nest. And then when there's concrete, there's impervious grass, it gets really tricky for them to survive. And when there's more stuff like, when there's more people changing up their yards, it can really have a major effect, a major positive effect.
The Bee Campus USA program was a multiple step process that came to fruition based off of the Tree City USA designation. And when we were at SOU, when I was working at SOU, Tree City USA had a program called Tree Campus USA. And to become a Tree Campus USA, a campus had to meet certain criteria, 6 criteria. Those 6 criteria we folded into the Bee City and Bee Campus USA program with Phyllis Stiles in North Carolina. And she was extremely supportive of expanding Bee City USA and making it Bee Campus USA, or making campuses eligible to become Bee Campus USAs. And just off of the framework that Tree City USA and Tree Campus USA had already created, we built the Bee Campus USA program. And it's very similar. You have to meet 6 criteria. You have to provide a place for pollinators to raise their young. You have to provide pollinator habitat. You have to teach pollinator ecology classes, some sort of curriculum. You have to do outreach into the community about pollinator ecology. You have to host some sort of celebration every year surrounding pollinators. And then you have to do some sort of outreach outside of the campus community. And so it took several years, but in 2015, SOU was accredited as the first Bee Campus USA in the country. The Rogue Valley in the Siskiyou Crest area is surrounded by natural areas, and we have millions and hundreds of thousands and millions of acres of wild native lands around us that host a wide variety of species. It's one of the most biodiverse regions in the world, and as such, it hosts enormous numbers of plants and animals, and pollinators are just one of those many species that can thrive here.
As a suburban issue though, if I were just like, well, you know, food is nice, you know, all the flowers that I like in my garden, if I want those around, I'm going to need pollinators. Even this farm, like, you're not going to have any of these flowers. Simple things like whatever that tree is probably here because a pollinator pollinated it. And it's not just like you don't have the fruit, but you actually don't have the landscape, right? You know, these things are not here at all. So you're sitting here basically in a desert at that point, you know, because grass will grow. That's, you know.
Habitat fragmentation is probably one of the leading causes of declines that we've seen recently. And what that means is that pollinators are very small animals, and as they reproduce and they need to raise their young, and they need to have a place to host their home and resources for that, they can't travel really great distances. And so when we have monocultures or huge farms that grow one species predominantly, and if it's not pollinator friendly, pollinators have a very difficult time getting through that huge, vast space. Sometimes it's thousands of acres. Sometimes it's just a freeway. Sometimes it's a golf course.
Teaching children and doing what, let's say, Sarah Red Laird of the Bee Girl organization does, which is like kids and bees and things like that, it's so important to talk to children about these things, because a lot of people, I think, get scared of bees or wasps even because their parents are afraid of them, you know? And to kind of like subvert in that way, right? Like fight the power one kid at a time and teach them not to be afraid of things, because the fewer things they're afraid of, the more attention that they as adults can give these animals, because that's what they're, insects, and animals that deserve preservation.
If we as citizens and as students can provide small micro habitats more readily throughout our communities, we can bridge that gap of habitat areas and fragmentation that we're losing.
Well, first of all, we've had an endemic species of bumblebee here in Ashland, like right out here. It was a dominant species up till about 30 years ago. It was declining, and it was last seen in 2006. And that's kind of what's been happening with the other species as well. We've lost 3 dominant species already.
I think it's important to acknowledge that while honeybees kind of get like the rock star title of bees, that honeybees aren't a native species. They're brought over from Europe. They're generally speaking a livestock animal in this country, and that we have an enormous population of native bees and pollinators that also need habitat revitalization and care and attention, right? And a lot of those bees, like 90+% of them, are solitary and ground dwelling, and they don't create honey for us to eat, but just because it's not something that we recognize as a benefit to us in that way, that it's important to take care of our environment and habitat.
Insects alone are like the base of the food chain for like every living, not everything, but they're towards the bottom of the food chain. And so like when there's major shifts in like their abundance, that can have consequences higher up in the food chain,
It should send signals to us that something's not right in our environment, and we're observing that kind of globally right now.